To begin, you're going to use your wire tool to cut a thin slab of clay. You're aiming for about 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch, and you want it to be even all the way through when you cut it. So watch what you're doing. And then don't forget to wrap your clay back up so it doesn't dry out while you're working. Put it away. And you're going to work on a nice clean surface. Get your rolling pin out. My rolling pin has built-in rolling guides. That's what the little colored end pieces are. If you don't have that, paint sticks, paint stir sticks work excellently. Put one on each side, and that's about the thickness that you would need for your clay. It's about 1/4 of an inch. I like to rotate it so that I can have a little bit more power when pushing it one direction. And when your rolling pin is rolling just on the rolling guides and not on your clay, you're done. Then use any type of a rib to smooth out the clay. I am using an old gift card. You want to do this in more than one direction. This actually compresses the clay so it avoids cracking and warping. Do this on both sides of your clay. Get a piece of plastic wrap and lay out all over top of your clay and smooth it out. And then you're going to press your cookie cutters down through the plastic wrap. This helps keep the cookie cutters from sticking in your clay, and it also gives you rounded edges. It's a little bit less smoothing you have to do as well. I purchased these cookie cutters at the dollar store. When you're finished, remove the plastic wrap, put it to the side for later, and then just like making cookies or biscuits, you're going to remove all of the clay from around your cutout areas. It's generally a little bit easier or safer to remove the clay around because clay has memory. So if you're mishandling your shapes that you've cut out a lot and stretching them and bending them, your clay will have a tendency to remember that you did that, and it'll want to go back to that bent shape. Ball up that clay scrap for later. Wrap it up so it doesn't dry out. Then you have your leftover cutout shapes that you can begin to apply texture on. Think about cool things that make texture. I'm using a seashell right here, the edge of it has nice little ribs, and the glaze will pool in those deep areas. I also use other found objects like a shotgun shell casing. It makes a perfect hexagon where I can make a bee comb or honeycomb shape. Think about what objects you might have around your house that could be interesting and create texture. I've used Legos. My children's toys quite often get used. I've used sewing kit materials, rocks that I've found, tree bark, necklaces, earrings, buttons. So just look around and start thinking about what you could press into clay and what would look interesting. You can also cut out smaller shapes and slip and score them on. Don't forget to smooth out around the edges. Sometimes if you are putting two thicknesses, you'll want to flatten one of the thicknesses out a little bit. So I flattened this flower before I attached it to the larger flower shape. A smooth area on top of a textured area can add some interesting contrast. The tool I'm using now is actually for sewing. It's to help with with patterns on fabric. So both the blue and the red handled tools are sewing tools. This is a piece of foam from a mattress topper. You could also use carpet foam. Any type of foam works, that is, as long as it's squishy. And I cut it out and then drew circles with a Sharpie so that it would be centered. So now I'm taking my clay that has hardened a little bit, and I'm using a tennis ball to squish down into the foam. This is an easy way of doming your clay. This technique can also be used to create lids for your pots. If your clay is too wet, you might have to do it again later. And if your clay is too dry, it might crack on you. Now I'm going to add some texture to the outer edge of these little dishes. The shotgun shell has a cool linear texture to it. The seashell that I'm going to use has interesting lines also. They're a little bit more organic. Now I'm going to go through and get a slightly damp sponge and smooth out the edges. You don't want to add a lot of water at this point. You just want just enough to make sure your edges and any other areas are nice and smooth. For the final step of making your trinket dishes, you need to put your initials and class symbol on the bottom of your projects.